great Odin's raven.
I feel the need for speed.
Ow! Oh, no, not the bees! Not the bees! Ah!
Hey! Where did you get those clothes? At the toilet store?
And I thought my jokes were bad.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another show of Miatc and the Chief. Chief, how's it going, man?
Going good. I got the Colts game in the background, so
Yeah,
it's a good day.
So be prepared on this episode that we may lose Patrick's attention every once in a while. So if Patrick goes a little off, don't be surprised. We'll try and make sure
You
that
hear some random screams.
that means the Colts will score, which you will already have known because you'll be listening to this after the Colts game is over. So you'll know whether we have a happy Chief or a non-happy Chief. But hey, we had a lot happen this last week, and we're going to get to the college football, obviously, here in a minute. But, Patrick, again, it's still your favorite time of the year because it's postseason baseball. And we've got some championship series.
We got championship series going on, NFL, college football.
Hey, NHL season is starting right now.
NHL season started yesterday. Shout out to my Tampa Bay Lightning.
They get a win on opening day.
I don't know, but it's going to be our year this year.
Wow, so good of you to know your team and when they're playing. The Penguins are playing right now as we speak, and I'm not watching that game because we're here. But hey,
Look,
it is
hockey in Louisiana, so.
well true. It is playoff baseball time. It is ALCS championship or ALC. That's hard for me to say. ALCS time. It is NLCS time. So let's talk a little bit about those matchups. We'll start in the ALCS. We've got the Kansas City Royals against the Baltimore Orioles. And Patrick, let's be honest. This is not at all what you thought was going to happen. But let's be honest. This isn't at all what you thought was going to happen on either side. So this is a complete surprise for you.
If we're keeping score based on predictions, I went 0 for 4. So think of how the playoffs are right now. I picked the exact opposite of all 4 teams to go into the championship series.
Yeah,
But
Patrick Howie, our baseball expert on the show, having a little trouble this year. But we do have Kansas City against Baltimore, a matchup that I'm pretty sure I predicted. I don't remember if I picked the Tigers or not. If I picked Baltimore or the Tiger or Detroit.
No, you picked Detroit, I remember.
Did I?
But
I know I picked KC. So
you did pick KC, but you picked Detroit, even though you did make a compelling argument for Baltimore.
yeah.
I do remember.
So this is the matchup we have, though, whether we picked it or not. So what do you think is going to happen?
Man, this is the ultimate matchup because you have a team like Baltimore, which is what every ownership and general manager strives for, built on solid offense and somewhat of a deep rotation. They have that ultimate power. They can drive the ball, hit a lot of home runs. But Kansas City wins their games in the way that I like to watch baseball, which is a lot of small ball, a lot of bunts, stolen bases, singles, pickoffs, things of that nature. And they like pick at you in every single way possible until they find your weakness, and then they end up attacking it and getting the win. I will say Baltimore has the deeper pitching rotation, along with bullpen. Kansas City's isn't bad, but I do like Baltimore's better. So, Kansas City, you made it to the championship series. That's great, but I'm going to say Baltimore moves on for this one. Baltimore World Series.
All right, Baltimore.
I would love to see the All-Missouri World Series. That would be just insane.
Well, you brought up a good point. This is very, very opposite styles. You got obviously Baltimore playing power ball, like you said. You got Kansas City playing speed ball, playing a lot of small ball. You look at home runs. Baltimore led the league with 211 in the regular season. The Royals are the only team who didn't hit over 100 home runs. But obviously, you look at the other side of it. Kansas City led the majors with 153 stolen bases, which is a lot of bases. I kind of feel like the pitching rotation and the bullpen is kind of a wash on both of these teams. I don't know how to pick against that. What I will say is that it's hard for me to go against a team like Kansas City, and obviously, as I said last week on the show, I kind of picked them as I picked them as my dark horse way back in March, way back before the season started, and I feel like I have to stick with them now. I don't know. It's interesting because I think, and this is going to sound very cliche in the way of picking a series, but I think the team that wins the first game on the road is the team that wins this series. Because you look at Kansas City, obviously they play in a massive ballpark, and so their style of play obviously is tailored to their ballpark. And so it'll be interesting to see how well, if Baltimore can use the power to hit out of that ballpark. It's going to be interesting to see that. I don't know. Obviously, Baltimore's got the home field advantage, so I think whoever wins the first road game is the one that wins the series, and I'm going to say that that's going to be Kansas City. I think Kansas City is going to win Game 1.
You're going to say Game 1?
I think Kansas City is going to win Game 1. I think they're the hot team. I think they're going to win Game 1. They'll lose Game 2, win Games 3 and 4, lose Game 5, win Game 6.
See, I feel the opposite. I feel like they're going to lose Game 1, but they're going to win Game 2, mainly because of Chris Tillman for Baltimore. He has been lights out in his last couple starts. He's been pitching very well postseason, and I'm not so sold on James Shield as much as everyone else is. I know he's got the postseason resume, whereas Baltimore really lacks that credibility. But at the same time, he's not that outstanding of a pitcher that you're going to need to win ball games. He's not that cornerstone like a lot of teams have, like Chris Tillman for Baltimore, Wainwright for St. Louis, and you have Bumgarner for San Francisco. I don't see James Shields as that number one ace, where obviously he would be compared to everyone else in Kansas City. I don't see him as that guy you need to win a World Series or even a championship series.
Well, you got two guys that are coming off of, in their last start, both of them allowed 2 runs. Both of them got the win. James Shields went 6 innings. Tillman went 5. So, at this point in the season, it's all kind of a crapshoot anyways, in terms of who's going to show up and who's not going to show up. So I think it's going to be a good matchup. I think it's going to be a fun series. And I think Kansas City's going to win it. So you got Baltimore, I got KC in that one, right?
That's right.
That's right. So let's move on to the NLCS, where we have the San Francisco Giants against our St. Louis Cardinals. To be fair there, we'll get that out of the way, obviously, and say that. Now, this is going to be another interesting series. What do you see happening in this one?
For St. Louis, honestly, the toughest part of this postseason is probably behind them. They're not going to face another pitcher like Clayton Kershaw, and they faced him twice and were able to win 2 games against Kershaw. Now, Masson, Bumgarner, and those guys over in San Francisco are great pitchers, and they do have a solid rotation, but it's nothing like Greinke, nothing like Koji, nothing like Kershaw, nothing like those guys, which is why they chose to pitch Kershaw twice, because of the fact that he's so dynamic. even though Kershaw, I believe, has a 1-5 postseason record, which to me screams out that he's the Peyton Manning.
Oh, I was just about to say that.
You really?
I really, really was. I was gonna say MLB is Peyton Manning.
I think Clayton Kershaw is the Peyton Manning of Major League Baseball.
I'm okay with that.
But here's where it's tricky. St. Louis still has a bit of a tough time manufacturing runs. Most of their runs against Los Angeles were home runs. Matt Carpenter can't hit home runs every single time he gets up to bat.
Yeah.
If it wasn't Matt Carpenter, you saw Cole Wong hit a 2-run home run. You saw Matt Adams hit a 2-run blast. That was mostly where your runs came from for St. Louis. And I don't think you're going to be able to get runs that way against San Francisco. So they're going to have to get a lot of kind of singles, extra base hits, kind of manufacture a deep little run in order to win, because those home runs are not going to get you anywhere with San Francisco.
So who you picking?
I'm picking St. Louis, but it's going to go deeper. I think it's going to go the full amount for this one, but I will pick St. Louis.
Yeah, I think this one does have the look of a 7-game series. At least before it starts, it looks that way. And the Cardinals do have home field here, so if it goes 7, we're playing that final game in Busch Stadium. So I think that gives them the edge. Now, I'll say this about the Cardinals: I feel like they've been so up and down throughout the year that I'm really not entirely sure what to expect from them. And so, I don't know. This one to me, I feel like is almost harder to pick than KC Baltimore. KC Baltimore, you know what those teams are going to bring to the table. Baltimore's going to try and hit the ball out of the park. KC's going to play small ball. These teams, Wainwright could throw a no-hitter, or he could allow 17 runs in the first inning. I don't know. And I feel like San Francisco is very much the same way. That being said, I think this is where the Cardinals, having been to the NLCS, this is the 4th straight year now? Or no, yeah, 4th straight year. I think that plays in their favor. And I think that you're going to see them move on and be in the World Series. It's probably going to go 7. It's at least going to go 6. It's probably going to go 7. And I'm taking the Cardinals to win it.
I will say the key to this series is Game 1, because Wainwright did not have his best stuff the last time he was out, which is probably why they did not pitch him in Game 4, which I really liked. But the Cardinals have kind of admitted that he's a little bit injured. His elbow is kind of hurting him a little bit. Of course, he's going to try to give it a go for Game 1. But if he can pitch a good outing, a good solid 6 innings, then the Cardinals will be all right and probably hold up in the series. But if Wainwright doesn't have his best stuff and that elbow's hurting him, and he gives up a couple runs early, this series is going to have a very different outlook going through.
I think that's a good way to look at it. So on my side, you've got KC, St. Louis meeting up in the World Series. Patrick's got Baltimore versus St. Louis. So we're both saying St. Louis. There's maybe a little bit of homer there. I don't know. We won't say too much about that. But
to be honest, I did pick LA to go out and not St. Louis. So
yeah, so this one's you didn't pick any of these teams, so it wouldn't have mattered. But hey, that's baseball. Look forward to some fun series. We're gonna take a break, and then we'll be right back to talk about some college football. All right, guys, we are back. It is now time to talk college football. And Patrick, we had an absolutely crazy week of college football last weekend.
It started on Thursday and ended late Sunday night.
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you look at the top 10 this week from last week, and it's just, I mean, it's almost unrecognizable.
Isn't like two or three teams in the top 10 that remained from last week to this week?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on which one you look at. I'm looking at the AP poll. Well, which one am I looking at right now? I forget which one they usually use most often until, is it AP poll?
They use AP poll.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm looking at it. Florida State stays number 1, obviously. Auburn moves from 5 to 2, so that stays in the top 10. Baylor moves from 7 to 5, so they stay in the top 10. Notre Dame from 9 to 6, they stay in the top 10. And Alabama dropped from 3 to 7, so they stay in the top 10. Other than that, completely. Florida State's the only one that's the same. I mean, you look at the AP poll, the state of Mississippi doing really, really well. Tied for 3rd. You got Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Both of them were outside of the top 10. TCU, after beating Oklahoma, number 4 Oklahoma, moves up to number 9. They were at number 25. Then you look at Arizona. Arizona, who goes out there and beats Oregon, who is 5-0 right now, goes from being completely unranked to number 10. So, needless to say, we're all over the place. Texas A&M dropped out. Oregon drops out. Oklahoma, as I already mentioned, dropped out. UCLA drops out. Teams just falling left and right. A lot of losses. This will make you very happy. Arkansas is receiving votes now. That's just how good the SEC West is.
They're the only team in there that's not ranked.
Yeah.
Well, they were, other than LSU.
You know who else is getting votes still? North Dakota State.
I love it. I love it.
North Dakota State's still getting votes.
They should.
So, I mean, we won't talk so much about those upsets. I'm sure if you listen to the show, you watch plenty of college football shows, so you've seen them talked about. So we won't recap them so much, but when we do talk about our picks for this week, we will mention, obviously, some of those teams are playing in games that we're picking again this week, and so we'll talk about some of those as they do apply. But we do have 5 games in college football to pick from this week. So go ahead, let's start off. Make sure you get your picks in. You do have less time to do it this week because we're not getting them out until Thursday. Patrick lost power yesterday, so we couldn't do the show like we normally do. So we are doing it a day later. Still get your picks in. You still got plenty of time. Do that. But hey, let's start off in the SEC where we seem to have had just a lot of fun last week again. Let's start off with Georgia, Missouri. Now, before I ask you who you're going to pick, I will mention that we are glad that we're a day behind now. Thank you, Power Company, because if we were picking this yesterday, we wouldn't know about Todd Gurley being suspended. So, Patrick, let me ask you now, while you're telling me your pick, does that change who you pick in this game?
Yeah, it really does. Like, whenever I was looking at the matchup, it was pretty even before Todd Gurley was announced to be suspended. But whenever you take into account that he will not play against Missouri, and the fact that
Uh-oh. I think we've lost Patrick. Patrick, if you come back in, hang on a second, because I think we lost you. So, I guess I'm waiting to see if Patrick will come back in, so I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about this game while I'm waiting on him to make sure he's going to wave at me when he notices that he's back and he can hear me. Okay. Georgia at number 13, Missouri at 23. Patrick was just talking about Todd Gurley and whether or not this really changes the pick. And I think what he was getting at, and I know for me it is this way, this was a pretty dead even game, I think, before Todd Gurley was announced as being suspended. Is that right, Patrick?
Right. That is exactly what was going on.
And so I had Georgia picked, and then the Todd Gurley suspension came down, and you know what? I look at it. almost every game in the SEC so far this season has been a wash anyways. But I think not having Todd Gurley really affects Georgia in a negative way, and I think Missouri's going to come out on top. Plus, Missouri's at home.
Yeah. Take into account that they're at home definitely gives Missouri a good chance to win, regardless if Gurley's in or not. But the fact that Gurley's out, which is a huge part of their offense, definitely makes you think that there might be a slight upset. 13-23, not a huge upset, but it's an upset nevertheless.
I think it would be an upset if Missouri wasn't an SEC team. But since Missouri's an SEC team, you can't really classify it as an upset.
If this was like ACC or something like that, and if it was 23-13, maybe it feels even like a smaller. Feels like East Carolina 23.
Yeah.
Playing Georgia. Yeah, it would be an upset.
But I feel like these teams are pretty even. So I'm going Missouri. You're going Missouri?
I'm going Missouri.
We got 2 Missouris so far. So those are our picks for that game. So let's move. Let's move to the Pac-12. We've got Oregon, who's coming off of a loss. UCLA, who I believe is also... No, are they coming off a loss this week, or was that 2 weeks ago? Yeah, that was last week, too. So they've also lost now. So you're looking at number 18 UCLA against... Where's Oregon now? I'm trying to remember. Against number 12 Oregon. It's at UCLA. Who you got there?
This is a tough one. Oregon, as we know, is coming off a big loss against Arizona. And then, of course, UCLA, who honestly is not playing up to standards that everyone expected them to. A lot of people thought Brett Hundley, pretty much Heisman lock going into the year, would take over. But you know what? Their defense is not playing as well as everyone expected them to. When you look at their points against, they're 72nd overall in the nation, giving up a little bit over 25 points. And
that's with playing Memphis.
That's with playing. They almost lost to Memphis. Let's not forget about that, people.
That stat should be skewed farther down when you've played Memphis. And It's not. That ought to tell you something.
Me and Matt have seen Memphis firsthand a couple times. They're terrible.
They're awful.
They're so terrible. But even though it is in L.A., I'm giving the edge to Oregon. They have that insane rushing attack. Mariota's going to attack UCLA's defense. Oregon's just too fast for UCLA to catch up, even though it's going to be at home. Their defense, not that great, but at the same time, it's better than UCLA's. Oregon scores a lot of points. They pretty much score at will. And I'm giving the edge to Oregon.
We didn't talk about Oregon much last week because they played the Thursday night game. And we usually don't talk about Thursday night games that much because usually the show comes out on Thursday. And just in case people don't get a chance to listen to it before the Thursday game, we don't like to talk about it. Especially this week, it really wouldn't have done us much good to be talking about it as it's happening. We could have looked like real geniuses. But I told you last week when this game was either going on or it was just about to go on or it was just ending or something that I would actually have picked Arizona last week to beat Oregon. Oregon's due to lose one game that they shouldn't lose a year. I feel like it seems like it happens every year. Now, Arizona's a good football team, and they beat Oregon last year, so that didn't surprise me at all. But I do think that Oregon is a lot better team than what they played like last week. I think they're definitely a better team than UCLA. I think Oregon's going to come out of the gates like they're sprint champions and try and put up 60 points, as quickly as possible. So I've got Oregon, and I actually don't think it's going to be close. I think Oregon's going to win pretty easily this week. So that's my pick. I've got Oregon. You've got Oregon. So there's that. So far so good. We're actually the same. But hey, let's move to the state of Texas. We've got a matchup that's going to see some speed on one side and some good defense on the other. We got number 5 Baylor against newly number 9 TCU. Who you got there, Patrick?
TCU this year is really interesting. They've had a couple years where they've been mediocre for TCU standards. I mean, obviously they were an outstanding team, and probably even as early as 4 or 5 years ago. But the last couple of years have kind of taken a bit of a tumble with the Casey Payhow drug scandal, as I would like to call. But it does look like TCU is going back to their old ways. They have incredible defense. Matt, did you know they're only giving up an average of 13.5 points a game?
I would have guessed close to that.
Now, granted, they played Samford, not Stanford,
Samford, yeah.
with an M, Minnesota, which you liked before the year.
I like Minnesota. Still like Minnesota.
SMU, who is terrible. And they did win against Oklahoma last week, who neither of us like Oklahoma going into the year.
Not at all.
And we knew they were vulnerable. Of course, they did give up 33 points to Oklahoma, but still, it's Oklahoma, one of the best in the conference. You're going to expect that. Here's what I will say. Baylor has no defense. Everyone knows that. They've never had a defense. Also, Baylor, I want to say, put up 21 points against a terrible Texas team.
28, yeah. And that was
points.
the lowest score of the season so far, yeah.
Let me say that again. Against a terrible Texas team.
I do enjoy hearing that.
Who
Say it one more
doesn't?
time.
A terrible Texas team.
Perfect.
Now, this is at Waco. This is at home for Baylor. But TCU, top 20 in passing. They're averaging about 200 rushing yards. They're scoring a lot of points, about a little over 40 a game. Their defense, like I said, is outstanding. I think they're going to be able to stop Baylor's passing attack. And I think TCU, kind of like we mentioned with an Oregon, is going to be able to score at will. And I think TCU is going to pull the win on the road against Baylor.
Well, so far, we're 3 for 3 in terms of picking the same teams. I'm also going to go TCU. By the way, TCU is the only team Minnesota's lost to. Just so you know, Minnesota's 4-1. They're only lost to TCU. I think TCU's a real good team. Their defense is hard to prepare for because they play, at least most of the time, they play a 4-2-5. Which a lot of teams don't play. You don't see it that often, and that makes it harder to adjust to right off the bat. You've obviously got, that means you've got an extra DB on the field that most teams don't have, and that can hurt. That can hurt an opponent if you're playing an opponent like Baylor, who plays in the spread, who obviously a lot of their passing scheme is based on quick passes. Reading defenses as quick as you can, and it's easier to disguise some stuff in a 4-2-5. So, in that regards, I think TCU's better on defense, and they're nothing to scoff at on offense either. So I think TCU is gonna come out on top of that game. It'll probably be close. It'll probably be very similar to that Oklahoma game that TCU had last week, but I think TCU will pull it out. So, real quick, let's move back to the SEC. We got a couple more big games there. Let's start with the primetime game, Ole Miss versus Texas A&M. You've got tied for third, Ole Miss against number 14 Texas A&M. Patrick, quickly, who you got there?
Woo. This is going to be a very good game. I am picking Ole Miss to win this one. One, I really don't like A&M. Two, Hugh Freeze. And three, A&M has literally zero defense. Like we keep saying every single week, everyone keeps identifying the fact that A&M has never put, I feel like A&M has always forgotten to put men on the field on defense. And Ole Miss is on an emotional high, beating Alabama, which not a lot of people do. And They have another big test, obviously with A&M, because pretty much every SEC team, unless you're Kentucky, unless you're Vanderbilt, is a big test, and this is a huge test for A&M. While Arkansas exposed them, they lost last week. A&M is still a very good team. They're nothing like you said before. They're nothing to scoff at. It will be a close game, but I do think Ole Miss pulls off a win.
Yeah, 4 for 4. I've got Ole Miss winning this one as well. I mean, they're not. Ole Miss is 87th in the nation in rushing, which you just talked about Texas A&M's rushing defense being non-existent, and Arkansas exposing that. The problem for Texas A&M is that Hugh Freeze's offense uses the passing game similarly to how a lot of teams use the rushing game. They do a lot of short stuff. They're gonna kind of dink and dunk you here and there to get what they need to get. And Ole Miss has a really, really good defense right now. Looks really good. Now, granted, they've not played necessarily a whole lot of great teams, but I mean, they've played Boise State, who usually has a pretty good offense. They played Alabama, who's been putting up points against people and is obviously a great team. I like the way Ole Miss is playing right now. All right, it seems our old nemesis, the audio malfunction, has joined us again. So we're going to try and push through the college stuff real quick. As I was saying, long story short, I'm picking Ole Miss over Texas A&M. Patrick, same thing. So we both got Ole Miss over Texas A&M, which leads us to our last game, which is Auburn versus Mississippi State, which should just be a blasty blast, I think. Is the only way. Number 2 versus number 3. It's going to be a fun game. Patrick, real quick, who do you got?
This is so tough for me to choose. These offenses are so similar because it seems like they attack you so much with the run, and then all of a sudden they surprise you and pull off these great passing plays. Because you had 2 quarterbacks with Nick Marshall and Dak Prescott, who Prescott now having 2 spectacular games in a row is being mentioned for Heisman, which he should have been mentioned a long time ago. And then you have Nick Marshall, who
Told you.
then you have Nick Marshall, who beginning of the year I thought was severely overrated. He's proving me wrong. He's proving me why he's starting to get all this hype. And then you have their defenses who are actually pretty much both equally underrated. No one really talks about both teams' defenses and how well they are. Of course, no one's really even uttered the name Mississippi State until the past couple weeks. And then if you hear about Auburn's defense, you hear about Mike Davis Jr. in their return against Alabama last year, and that's pretty much it. But this game is so evenly matched. I'm picking Mississippi State strictly because of the fact that it's in Stark Vegas. That's the only reason why I'm picking it.
Well. If one of us does good this weekend, both of us are doing really good because I'm also picking Mississippi State. And we've been talking about Mississippi State. Obviously, me and Patrick on football Saturdays are texting a lot. I've been talking about Dak for a couple weeks now. I may not have mentioned him on the show at any point in time, but I feel like I was talking about him at the beginning of the year about Mississippi State being a team to keep an eye on. And they kind of, if I'm honest, I agree with you. I think the teams are almost dead even. I feel like this is a dead even pick. But I feel like Mississippi State is the team this year that Auburn kind of was last year. Kind of that team that just has it, so to speak. And I think, last week we saw Dak Prescott I think it was against LSU, do one of those kind of Johnny Manziel-esque escapes and throwing a football for a touchdown. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like that again. I think I said this to you a week ago, or when that game was going on, that Dak Prescott should be your leader for the Heisman right now, and he will be until or if Mississippi State ever loses. I really like this team. I'm also going Mississippi State. So there you have it. College football-wise, me and Patrick, exactly the same. We're going Mizzou, Oregon, TCU, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. So if we're gonna do well this week, we're both gonna do well. If we do terrible, we both do terrible. So that's that. That's college football. We're gonna take a break, and then we will be an actual break that we're choosing to take. No audio malfunction this time, and then we'll be right back to talk NFL. All right, here we go. It's time now for the NFL talk for the week. We're gonna come at you with some picks. I sound like Mike Tyson. We're gonna come at you with some picks real quick, and we're gonna talk some fantasy football here in a bit as well. But hey, let's start out with our picks this week, Patrick. We've got some games this week that should be some fun. So let's start with an NFC East matchup. Which a couple weeks ago didn't look like it would be any good, but now it's kind of turned into a decent game. We've got New York Giants facing off against the Philadelphia Eagles. Who you got in that game?
I've got the Giants winning that game strictly because of the fact that their passing game, Eli Manning has done exceptionally well the past couple games, and their rushing attack has gotten better as well. Now, Rashad Jennings probably will not play at all this game, but they do have the leading rusher in the NCAA for 2013 with Andre Williams, and he has looked very well. He looked well preseason. The little snaps that he got leading up to this point have been very well. He did well last week, whereas Philly, they've had a couple injuries, and Lane Johnson has been suspended to add up for a very, very weak O-line that will have Lane Johnson back. I don't know how well he'll do with his first game going into this matchup, but I just feel like with a well-rounded New York Giants offense, it's going to be very hard for Philly to pull off a win.
You know, I think this is kind of a matchup of two teams that are kind of Jekyll and Hyde. Neither team is really, I mean, they've both kind of been up and down already this season, and so I think this is a really hard game to pick, actually. I'm going to go with Philly because it's at Philadelphia. It's Sunday night game. I get that he's had a good couple weeks, but I do not trust Eli Manning to be consistent for a long period of time. He's had a couple good games. I'm expecting him to throw a couple interceptions now again. So I'm leaning towards Philadelphia in that game. But I will admit it's a hard game to pick, and I'm not really sure which way it's going to go. But I am going to go with Philadelphia. Let's see what they do last week. I'm trying to think of who they played last week.
Philadelphia?
Yeah. They played St. Louis. Played St. Louis and almost screwed that up. But I don't know. I think Philadelphia is slightly better, and I don't trust Eli Manning, so I'm going Philadelphia.
All right.
So you got Giants, I got Philadelphia. So we're finally, for the first time this week, we're finally different. So let's go with another game that should be a pretty good one. We've got, and again, teams that I feel like we kind of have seen both sides of and aren't really sure what to think of. We got Carolina playing at Cincinnati. Who you got in that game?
I don't know if you've seen a trend with Carolina these past, actually this whole NFL season. Carolina is a terrible first half team, but they're an outstanding second half team.
Kind of like the Philadelphia Eagles.
Exactly. I feel like it doesn't matter how many points they're behind going into the second half. they're going to come back and either win or come very, very close, pulling off the win in the second half. But this is a tough one for me. Carolina's defense has played up and down. Like, there's been games where they've played exceptionally well, and there's just times where they just kind of crap the bed. I feel like saying that this is a week where they're just going to crap the bed on the road at Cincinnati. With Sanu, with AJ Green, even though AJ Green was carted off the practice field the other day with a toe injury, I feel like he's going to play anyways. Then you have Giovanni Bernard and Jeremy Hill as a 1-2 punch for that running attack. I feel like Cincinnati does pull up the win in this one.
Yeah, I didn't do a good job picking these games because I picked the ones that I feel like are really, really hard to go against. Really hard to pick one way and feel super confident. But I feel better about not St. Louis. Why am I saying St. Louis? I feel better about Cincinnati coming off of last week's loss to New England, who kind of came out of nowhere last week and decided that, football season started, we should actually play football. So I don't know if last week was an aberration or if they're actually going to play good football this week. AJ Green obviously is a big X factor in terms of if he plays, that's good. If he doesn't play, that could be awful. But I am going to stick with the Ginger. I am going to stick with Cincinnati. And so I'm going to pick Cincinnati to win that game over the Carolina Panthers. So let's move to another game. We've got Pittsburgh taking on Cleveland in a battle of the AFC North. Who you got in that game?
I've got Cleveland in this one. Believe it or not, Cleveland is one of those surprise teams, and if I could describe Cleveland to you at this point without naming the starting quarterback, you would think, it's Manziel playing. Negative, because Manziel.
It's Brian Hoyer, baby.
I thought Manziel, from the very, very little we've seen, is terrible. And Brian Hoyer is leading the way. Now, granted, no one probably would have expected this either, but they are fourth in the league in rushing.
Mm-hmm. And they get Ben Tate back, or they got him back last week. They have him for another week this week. So I think that's going to help out. That's going to help that offense out even more. I think you saw a team with the Browns that I don't want to say struggle. Now, granted, they've already played Pittsburgh. They played them opening day and lost 30-27. But that was at Pittsburgh, and that was having some trouble. And they still do have some trouble with injuries going on their team, and that could be a big deal. But I do think that that they're going to be able to come through and they're going to be able to play Sunday against Pittsburgh, because I just don't trust Pittsburgh either. Pittsburgh's kind of one of those teams that's, they're up and down. I'm not really sure what to think of them. And I think if they can really establish a running game, so that, because I think that offense is predicated on, you have to establish a rushing game so that Brian Hoyer isn't forced to sit back in the pocket and throw 47 times a game to win. If he doesn't have to sit back there and throw all day, and they can run the ball effectively, which they've been able to do all season, I think you're going to see the Browns win. Now, their defense does scare me a little bit, because their defense is not that good.
No, their defense is pretty bad.
Yeah, 28th in passing, 30th in rushing. So those aren't stats that you want to see necessarily, but I think it's going to be close again. It's going to be close again.
But that's just been the trend for Cleveland in general.
That's true.
They lost Pittsburgh, first game at Pittsburgh by 3. They beat New Orleans
by 2.
At home by 2. They beat Baltimore. They lost to Baltimore at home by 2. They won
Beat Tennessee by
Huge.
1.
at Tennessee by 1.
Yeah, our good friend Roger, who is the biggest Browns fan I personally know and have ever met, and probably ever care to meet, is that sounds real mean. Sorry, Roger. You're a good fan. You're a good fan. He's been calling them the cardiac kids, and they've seemed to be that way so far this year. And I would almost expect it to be a reverse of the last time they met, and Cleveland win 30-27 or 30-28, something like that. I think that's what I'm going to see. So, but we both got Cleveland in that game, which I feel like
Surprise.
I feel like most people wouldn't think 2 people are going to pick Cleveland in a week. What? Let's talk about another game that's turned out it's going to be a huge game now. A lot of people would have thought written this game off at the beginning of the season because of where a lot of people, not me, were picking a certain team to be at the end of the season. We've got Dallas at Seattle. Patrick, who you got?
If
Are you making me mad or are you making me happy?
I'm going to make you happy.
Oh, good.
I'm just saying, if this was a week 1 game and you were asking me for my reaction, I would have laughed at your face because of the fact that you were asking me to make a pick of this game. But it's not week 1. This is week 6. Dallas is 4-1.
Mm-hmm.
Who saw that coming? No one did. Not even you saw Dallas being 4-1.
I didn't see it being 4-1 necessarily, but I do recall me saying that they were probably going to win the NFC East and get into the playoffs.
Well, everyone's raving that Dallas is 4-1, but now that I see their schedule, let's take this into account. They've won at Tennessee. It's not hard to win at Tennessee. They've won at St. Louis. It's not hard to win at St. Louis.
Oh, that's not true. We'll talk about St. Louis more here in a minute, though.
Week 3 St. Louis compared to now is different.
We'll talk more about St. Louis in a minute.
Okay. A win at home against New Orleans. New Orleans is terrible. In an overtime win at Houston, the Colts are showing that Houston is not a good team. So, yes, Dallas is 4-1, but I feel like it is a 4-1 with an asterisk because they have not really played the talent that other teams have that have similar records. So, with that being said, they're playing at Seattle. 12th man, always going to be there no matter who you play. It's an afternoon game on Fox, so technically it's prime time. I consider all late afternoon games prime time because of the lack of them. Plus, it's at home, so I see a big win for Seattle in this game.
This is. Is it surprising you that I'm having a little trouble saying stuff about this game?
Yes,
you would think
it's Seattle with the biggest Seattle fan.
Well, not the biggest Seattle fan, but I am a pretty big Seattle fan. I think you're a little bit wrong. I think you're a little bit wrong to underestimate how good this Dallas team is. I think the trick is that they haven't had to. Granted, they haven't had to throw the ball a lot, and that's the trick that's with this Dallas team. And they're actually playing halfway decent defense. I've been saying this for years about Tony Romo, that it's not Tony Romo's fault that the Cowboys have been so awful. I know he throws a lot of late game picks and a lot of picks in times that maybe aren't the best time to throw it. But you know what? He's been forced to throw a lot of footballs over the last couple of years. And when you throw a lot of footballs, you're going to throw interceptions every now and then. The trick this season is that Dallas is the number 2 rushing team in the NFL. DeMarco Murray's having a big year, and so Tony Romo hadn't had to drop back and throw the ball as much. They're 16th in the NFL in passing, but not because Tony Romo's been sucking. It's just that he hadn't had to do it. Now, some of that is on their schedule. I'll give you that. It's not the strongest schedule in the world, but St. Louis isn't a terrible team. Even week 3, St. Louis wasn't a terrible team. Still have a pretty good defense. Still have a decent offense. I mean, granted, they were trying to figure out what to do at quarterback then. But, the problem is that they're playing Seattle. And Seattle has the number 1 rushing defense in the league. So I think what you're going to see here is what Cowboys fans would call a classic Cowboys game over the last couple of years, and that means that Tony Romo is going to have to throw the ball a crap ton, and that means that there's going to be a couple interceptions, and more than likely, and that means that Seattle's going to win. Russell Wilson played lights out Monday night. That was against Washington, but that's Russell Wilson playing out of his mind is a bonus when you have Marshawn Lynch on your team, when you have Percy Harvin on your team, when you have Doug Baldwin on your team, even.
You just go out a whole freaking 53-man roster.
Yeah.
All are.
You know, the one thing that I can say that might help Dallas out if they do have to pass the ball a ton is that, you know, Seattle's got the 22nd overall passing defense right now. Not as stout as what a lot of people would think they were. I think the loss of Browner to the Patriots is a little bit more of a big deal than a lot of people thought it was going to be. You know, I don't think that's going to make a difference though, because I think the trick with Seattle is that they score usually pretty early and then force you to throw the football. And like I said earlier, the problem that Dallas has had is that when they're forced to throw the football, is usually when they don't do too well. So all that being said, plus the fact that it's at Seattle, I can't pick anybody but Seattle, right? Seattle. I've got Seattle winning that game. I think it'll be closer than people think. Might think going into it, but I still think Seattle wins fairly easily. And I wouldn't be surprised if Russell Wilson puts up big numbers again. So, hey, we got one more game. It's the Monday night game. San Francisco at that St. Louis team. Who you got here?
Yeah, I've got San Francisco. Like I said before, I'm really not big on this St. Louis team, even though they did pull up an incredible offensive attack last week against Philly. A lot of people look at the score and just say, "Oh, Philly, quote unquote, kind of blew them out a little bit." But Austin Davis is kind of flourishing into I guess you would just call it just a actual NFL quarterback. I mean, going into the year, he was third string, so it's kind of like, why are you even here? Most third stringers are on the cusp of just getting cut to begin with, because a lot of teams are starting to not even carry three quarterbacks now. But, I mean, let's try to look at last week, for example, against Philadelphia. Because I want to say he had 3 touchdowns last week.
Oh, he went off last week. He had 375 yards. I don't remember how many touchdowns he had, but I know he had 375 yards passing.
He did.
You know, the trick is this is going to be a little bit of not strength against strength in a sense. San Francisco is the number 3 overall rushing team. St. Louis isn't too great at stopping the run. They are really good at stopping the pass. They're first in passing defense, which I don't think matters too much because you're playing San Francisco, who has Colin Kaepernick, who is not. I prefer to call him Colin Crappernick. As a Seahawks fan,
look, I don't really have a dog in the fight as far as the whole race for that division. But at the same time, I think we can all both agree that Kaepernick is just playing really bad this year.
Yeah, that's why I'm calling him Crappernick. I'm trying to get that started.
Also Seattle fan in general.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, but I talked to Grady, Chris Grady, one of our friends, who is a big 49ers fan, and he's having trouble figuring out what's going on, and he's not too happy with Kaepernick right now either, as can be expected. I think the interesting thing is it's going to all depend on how well San Francisco can run the ball against St. Louis. I think they're going to have a little bit of success, but I think that Colin Kaepernick not playing real well is going to play into St. Louis's favor. St. Louis is going to say, hey, you want to beat us? You throw the ball. We're going to make sure you can't run. You throw the ball. Make Colin Kaepernick beat us with his arm. And I don't think Colin Kaepernick, the way he's playing right now, can beat him with his arm. Or can beat St. Louis with his arm. So I'm going to go St. Louis in this game. I think St. Louis is going to win it.
Part of me wants to go St. Louis, but at the same time, St. Louis has a terrible rushing attack. Zach Stacy, I know firsthand because I drafted him in fantasy teams. He's playing awful.
Well, we know you're not the greatest at fantasy picks. We'll talk about that more here in a minute, too.
Will. But at the same time, like I said, Austin Davis played great last week, but San Francisco has a better secondary and better defense than Philadelphia does. So I feel like Austin Davis is going to be forced to throw 49 balls again like he did last week. And I don't think he's going to be able to throw 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. I think it may be a 1, maybe 2 touchdowns with maybe another 1, maybe 2 interceptions to top that. So the reason why I'm not picking St. Louis is the fact that, like you were saying with 49ers, they're going to have to be forced to throw a lot. St. Louis is going to have to be forced to throw a lot. And with that 49ers secondary, that's what scares me. I don't think Austin Davis is going to be able to take on 49ers like he did Philly. And that's why San Francisco loses that game, strictly by defense.
Yeah, I don't disagree too much. I mean, obviously you're picking San Fran, I'm picking St. Louis, so I disagree a little bit. But I think it's going to be one of those ugly games. I think it's going to be one of those ugly football games where you're just like, yeah, I guess that team should have won. Like, somebody's going to throw a pick six. There's probably going to be, like, multiple fumbles. I just have a feeling it's going to be an ugly game. But, hey, so you've got San Fran. I've got St.Louis. We both got Seattle. We both got Cleveland. We both got Cincy. You're going Giants. I'm going Philly. So that's our picks for this week. Get your picks in. Get your picks in. Get your picks in. That being said, it's time to talk a little fantasy football. Because, hey, look, Matt finally got a win this week. So Matt is finally Miatc is finally out of the lot, or into the win column. So, real quick, you were one of our high scorers. Who was our other high scorer last week?
Grady, wasn't it?
Grady, Chris Grady, our 49ers fan, our resident 49ers expert, I guess you could say, who is also 5-0 in fantasy football right now. So he's killing it right now and killing me and killing all of us. So congrats to him. But hey, let's talk our picks for this week. Who, Patrick, are you going to say that we should sit this week? Or who should we start this week? I'm sorry. We're going to start with starting, because that's where you should start.
Last week, my starter was a tight end. It did not go well, but let's just face it, literally none of my fantasy advice has gone over well. So I'm trying to go with the no-brainer, easy picks to kind of boost my confidence up. And so I look for the good teams and the bad teams and who they're playing, which is usually what you do with fantasy advice. But to further explain with my starter, I'm picking another tight end this week. I'm picking Antonio Gates against Oakland. So I really shouldn't explain myself of why I'm picking Antonio Gates, because they're playing Oakland.
Yeah, I think that kind of does it on its own. Yeah, I would if you can have him, I would definitely start him since he's playing them as well. My start this week, I'm looking once again, which I feel like I've done quite a bit this year. I'm looking at the running back position, and I'm going to say start Lamar Miller of the Miami Dolphins. He's playing against the Green Bay Packers this week. It's at Miami. Green Bay is 32nd in the league in rush defense. That's last, y'all. They're dead last. So I'm going to say start Lamar Miller. What did I say? Did I say Lamar Hill? Start Lamar
Hill.
Don't start that guy, because I don't know who Lamar Hill is. Start Lamar Miller, and I think you'll be happy with how many points you get this week from him. So that's our starter. Now, Patrick, who should people sit this week?
We mentioned this guy with one of our 5 games that we picked. Now, we did mention that Seattle is not playing to their potential as far as passing attack, but I will say that I'm picking to sit Romo against Seattle at Seattle. Let me stress that, at Seattle.
Well, you're coming up. That's 2 weeks in a row you've told people to sit a quarterback that's playing at Seattle or against Seattle. Granted, this is at Seattle. Obviously, that makes a little bit of a difference. I'm not going to say I disagree with that, but I'm going to say he puts up average numbers still. He'll put somewhere in the 15 to 20 range, I think. And
the average.
That'll probably be. So hopefully that's our last little issue for today. We're almost done anyways, so we're going to see if we can't finish this out. Patrick's saying to sit Tony Romo. I think he's going to have an average game, but I do have somebody to sit, and I'm saying, and I'm kind of cheating on this, I'm saying sit any New York Jets running back that you have. They are playing Denver this week, which means New York will probably be behind the entire game. Do what?
So the sad part is you're having to tell someone to sit a New York Giants running back.
Well,
still have New York Giants running backs, or for that matter, any New York Jet.
Well, that's probably true. I'm not going out on a limb there saying that. But your running backs aren't, unless they catch balls out of the backfield, they're not going to be having good games this week. So I'm saying to sit those guys. Now, Patrick, it's time for your sleeper pick. Who is your sleeper this week?
My sleeper is Steven Jackson going against a mediocre rushing defense for Chicago. Steven Jackson, a lot of people would discredit that pick because of the fact that he's injury prone. He has terrible hamstrings. But he is coming off a good stretch of double-digit fantasy points. I think he got... I don't know how many fantasy points he got last week. It was either 11 or 17. I know that's an odd number to go back and forth with. But he did score a touchdown last week, so there's that.
He had 12 points last week.
Yeah, how many?
12.
12?
Yeah.
Okay. But, like I said, with the below-average rushing defense for Chicago, that would be my sleeper for the week. Now, hopefully it breaks my stretch of terrible fantasy advice.
Well, it's got a long way to go because you too sometimes have terrible advice. My sleeper pick this week is going to be Justin Forsett, your running back for the Baltimore Ravens. They're playing against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is just not that good. They're kind of one of those weird teams that's just not that good. But you can't really tell, partially because they play in a terrible division. I mean, let's just be honest. The NFC South this year is just awful. With the Saints and not the Raiders, the Saints and the Falcons and the Bucks, and I mean even the Panthers aren't as strong as I thought they were going to be this year. Tampa Bay 18th in the league in stopping the run. That doesn't bode well. I think Baltimore is going to be ahead pretty early in that game, so I think they're going to be running the ball a lot. So I think he's going to rack up some yardage in that one. So I'm saying, I mean, this is a team that lost to the Saints last week, who have been awful. So Baltimore's probably going to run all over them. So start Justin Forsett. I know in at least one of my leagues, I was checking, because usually what I like to do is I like to look at the free agents and see, because when I pick my sleepers, because I like to see who's a guy that most people don't have that I think is going to be a good guy, that's going to be good to have on your team. So chances are Justin Forsett is probably available in your league, so go ahead and pick him up. because if you're like me, you're probably having running back troubles this year, because everybody's either suspended or injured, it seems like. So especially if you drafted Adrian Peterson, you need a running back, go get him, because it doesn't look like Adrian Peterson's going to be playing probably the rest of the season, if ever again.
If you haven't heard the news, your possible franchise fantasy guy decided to pull one of the dumbest moves I've ever heard of in my entire life, and decided to smoke a J right before he gives his drug test in court for his child abuse case. Who smokes pot before giving a drug test when they know they have to do it? It's like he's asking for it.
The same guy who's being charged with child abuse. So a long list of not good decisions probably there. But hey, that's going to do it for us this week. Make sure you're following us on Twitter. Make sure you're following us on Facebook. And YouTube. We're also on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe so that we're on your front page. Every time you go to YouTube, it'll be like, oh, hey, there's a new video from these guys, so you can check it out. But that is going to do it. Enjoy the college football weekend, because I think it's going to be a good weekend of football. Pat, it's time to get out of here.
I will say before we get out of here, I have been wanting to do this for a long time, and I keep forgetting to do it. I'm not going to forget this week. I'm going to give a shout out to another podcast. I don't know how often this happens in the podcast world, but I'm going to give another shout out, because this is a guy who has been our number one fan ever since we first put out the podcast, from day one.
True that.
Garrett Robertson has a podcast that he does with another friend, Chris. It's called The Hecklers, and it's on Podomatic like we used to have. I want to say they try to do, I think they do about 2 shows a week, whereas we do the 1 show a week. But they do kind of delve into multiple sports like we do. It's about the same time. I think it ranges from an hour and a half, which still, if you listen to it like I do, you really don't even feel like it's that long. They do a really good job being rookie podcasters like we are. So, Garrett, Chris, I'm giving you a shout out. If you guys are waiting for us to do a podcast and you're kind of just itching for something to listen to, check out the Hecklers on Podomatic. They're really good.
And they better shout us out now too.
They've done it before.
Oh, have they? I haven't had a chance to check it out yet. I've been kind of busy the last week or so, but.
Well, it was the A-State Miami game, and they were peaking, and they gave us a shout out because of the fact that
A-State,
we are
A-State. Who gets a pretty sweet Georgia State unis? Who gets to play against some pretty sweet Georgia State unis this weekend? But hey,
don't hear that sweet, but still.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's gonna do it for us. We gotta get out of here. So we'll catch you next week.
No, run! My tummy's rumbling. It's scary. Tommy's got the tum rums. In America it's bling bling, but out here it's bling bang, huh?
I already took what I call a Dwyer shower. I rub my armpits with air fresheners. New car.
Oh yeah, I'm experimenting with some new entrepreneurial ideas. That one's called Sport for Suds. Dress loud.